Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. And wherever you are in this wide, wonderful, beautiful world that we live in, you are very welcome to the Global Sales Leader Podcast. I am your host. Every time that we run this podcast, I delve into some thought-provoking conversations with some awesome guests in the same world of mindset, sales, psychology, communication, neuroscience, technology, and we touch on sales in some shape or form along the conversation. So this isn't just another sales podcast. It's also a sales leader podcast. I'm absolutely delighted this week. I actually got on number 9 on a list of the global sales leaders podcast. So I'm delighted with that. So don't know how I did that, but that's awesome because I think I just have awesome guests that I'm really excited to speak to. So whether you're leading global teams, building a business from the ground up, or simply looking to sharpen the edge, you'll find some chunk-sized learning and golden nuggets of knowledge here to help you, inspire you, to motivate you, to help you to get what you want. And today, my guest is Art Sobczak, if I've pronounced your name correctly. Welcome.
Hey, Jason, thank you. Great to be on here.
So, your name is synonymous with some practical real-world sales experience with over 40 years young of working with hundreds of thousands of people across the globe, getting this right. And you've worked with a huge amount of global organizations, and you're synonymous with 5 books. And the reason that I was so interested in speaking to you, I read your book and also got on Audible. I went, got to speak to this young fellow because he knows his stuff. So you're welcome. Could you fill in some of the gaps that I've just missed there, Art?
Well, there's a lot of gaps over 40 years.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
How much time do we have? Yeah, actually, I started a long time ago, and I started before my corporate life. I started in sales on the phone when I was 13 years old, selling tickets to the Policeman's Fundraiser Circus, which, as it turns out, was actually kind of a scam in retrospect. But it was a great introduction into sales, and it seems like not every job, but most of the jobs I fell into over the course of my life prior to getting out of college were in sales. And then, of course, after I got out of college, I went into a corporate sales position with the old AT&T in the US, which happened to be in what they call telemarketing, which was business to business telemarketing, which wasn't a bad word at the time.
Yeah.
And being an entrepreneur at heart, I knew I wanted to do my own thing and tried to figure it out. After about a year, I realized I was a great salesperson and not a good corporate employee. So I decided I was going to go out and do this on my own, this being showing people how they could do what AT&T was trying to teach people to do, and that was using the phone more in their business-to-business sales process. And like a lot of entrepreneurs, I proceeded to make every single mistake that an entrepreneur could possibly make, but also persevered and almost threw in the towel a few times, decided to make it. And here I am 40 years later in overnight success.
Yeah, it happens that way, doesn't it? I think the term that I like to use is failing forward. So you're not going to make that mistake again. And we fail so often. The question that I was wanting to ask is, over that 40 years, what was that pivot point that you failed and you went, bang, I've got something here to change the narrative? Something happened.
Well, it was probably within the first couple of years of business where things were tough. And I looked at the business and decided, how am I really going to make this successful? And I decided that I really needed to make a name for myself in the training business. And that's really where most of the revenue was going to come from as a speaker and trainer. Mm-hmm. The problem was, even though I was pretty good at it, I absolutely hated doing it because I was deathly afraid of it, even though that didn't come across on the surface. So I decided that I needed to do whatever it took to become as good as I possibly could on stage. And that meant taking the classes is going to get Toastmasters, practicing, getting in front of as many people as I
Toastmasters,
could.
apparently that comes from Ireland. Apparently, I heard Toastmasters
What's that?
International. And sorry to jump in there because I think that's really, really good because I did that as well. And I think Toastmasters is one of those things that you can stand up and be petrified in front of all these eyeballs ahead of you. So carry on with that because I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, I was probably a member for, I don't know, maybe a little bit less than a year because I'd already been a speaker. And it was good in the sense is that it's helped me get in front of people who were not in the sales world and helped me to expand a little bit and speak on different topics than what I was an expert on and get some feedback from others as well. And I have recommended this in every single training program I've probably ever given to people because whatever you do in life, you're always going to be speaking. And the better you are at it, the more successful you're going to be. Matter of fact, it should be a requirement for anybody that graduates from college or university, because again, whatever you do, speaking is going to make you better at it.
Yeah, and also getting over that fear factor as well as salespeople and as leaders is you have to communicate in front of people, and you have to, whether it's your team meetings or whether it's pitching in front of clients, you have to get that right. And Toastmasters, I always suggest to people when I'm training people, I trained some graduates earlier this year, and it was about your personal presence and your personal brand. And I was saying, well, what's your end goal? What would you like to do? I'd like to stand up. And Toastmasters, I suggested to every single person, it's one of the best things that you can do. Number one, to get over your fear factor. Number two, to stand up in front of people that you don't know and to communicate effectively so they can resonate with what you're saying.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, and I know you teach neuropsychology. The fact is that fear is just a story that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And you did the old acronym, false evidence appearing real, right? And people are afraid of screwing up when they're up there speaking. And the fact is, nobody out there would even know if you're screwing up with your material. So if you go out there and you do know your material and you know a lot more about it than they do, and you're confident in your delivery and you keep doing it, you can excel at it. Everybody can, even though so many people say, oh, I could never do that.
Yeah. And I think that's the number one fear factor is standing up in front of people, because it is the stories that you do tell yourself. But exactly as you say, I think we've met before somewhere along the line, because I think it's exactly the same. Is no one knows what you're going to say. You're the expert of your own. So that really should give you confidence in yourself already, because whatever is going to come out your mouth, no one's going to know it.
Yeah. And, confidence comes from competence. And if you know your material, which of course you do, that's probably why you're up there speaking in front of somebody, the more you do it, the more confident you're going to become. And this applies to anybody listening to us if you're speaking in any situation. But of course, this is a sales show, and it's especially relevant for salespeople. We've all seen that salesperson who appeared to be smooth and natural, like they have this God-given talent, like they were born upselling the nurse when they come out of the womb, right? But the fact is that in order to golf in the 80s, we have to golf in the 90s first. So we're going to hit some roadblocks, but that's not failure. That's not rejection, as long as we're learning from it, because everything is an experience, and it's only negative if we attach that negative story to it. And if we attach a positive story and say, well, what can I learn from this? Now we've learned from it. Now we're also getting better. So that's true in speaking. That's true in sales. That's true in life.
Yeah. I was coaching someone the other day, and I was doing a coach the coach training course, and I got the sales manager to do some practice coaching with one of the sales guys. He was about the third or fourth, and he was just chatting to his colleagues that had been coached before, and he came in and he was shaking like that. So he was telling himself some stories that we were going to ask some difficult questions, but in reality, we weren't. We were just practicing, and he just got to the point that he was just shaking, which I was just starting to think he was just giving himself some stories about situations that hadn't actually happened. So how we do that and how we can visualize change is a great thing. What do you think about visualization in terms of being as a salesperson or leader?
Well, I mean, it's proven. Again, I know your background. I know you study neuroscience, and it's been said that we'll never achieve anything unless we can see ourselves going there in our mind's eye first. And if we cannot see ourselves being successful on a sales call or hitting a golf shot or approaching someone that we would like to meet, if in our mind we're thinking, I'm not that type of person, or I just can't see myself doing that, well, you may as well, if you're a golfer, go and throw the ball in the water as opposed to hitting it, because that's where it's going to wind up anyway. Right. So, but if you can visualize it, then you can achieve it. There's the old story about Jesse Owens, and he was sitting silently before a race in the Olympics. And somebody came up to him and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm watching myself win this race."
Fantastic. Yeah, I've heard of that before. And some of the things that I was thinking of while you were saying that, because I know visualization is one part of the toolbox and the mindset is another part of the toolbox. But when it comes to people and success in people, and I know you've trained and coached thousands and thousands of people, what do you think the attributes are of success within? I know it's a big question here, but I want to dissect some of it. What are some of the key attributes of a successful salesperson or people?
Boy, it's almost like I fed you that question.
Yeah, well, you did really.
Actually, what I've done over the past probably 4 years is that I decided that there was really something missing in traditional sales training, because after working with hundreds of thousands of salespeople, and when I say working with, I mean hands-on, I didn't work with hundreds of thousands. They have received my material. I've personally worked with tens of thousands, and I've seen some who have been extraordinarily successful, or many, and I've seen also many who have flamed out that probably never should have been in sales in the first place.
Yep.
But I also saw a number that struggled, and they had the tools, but yet they weren't successful. And I'm trying to pinpoint, why is that? And what are the attributes of the ones who are truly successful? And my life's work has primarily been on providing the what to say, the how to say it, in what way to say it, in what situations to say it, the words we're using, and of course the methods in which we're doing it. But I also realize that that's all worthless unless the person themselves is the person who's going to do it. And I compare it to, everybody pretty much knows, I know you're an athlete, you're a runner, everybody knows what it takes to be healthy, be fit, and be in shape, and to be at the right weight, right? We have the knowledge. But then the question is, why is everybody not in shape? And the answer is because they are not internally the person who's going to do the things to get those results. And the same exact thing applies to salespeople. So I decided what I needed to do in the last quarter of my career here is to define those things, develop them, and then present them to salespeople in a way that is going to help them really achieve at the highest level and become what I call the ultimate sales professional. So that's the setup to the answer to your question. So I really identified 4 areas. So Jason, one is being others focused. And if we're not others focused, we're going to be that salesperson who's just going to pitch and talk about me, my stuff.
Me, myself, and I.
That's the stereotype of a salesperson. So we've got to be completely others focused. Now, the other one is being rejection proof. And this goes into kind of what we just touched on, and that is the stories we tell ourselves. Because as I've said for years, rejection is not what happens to you, it's the way you define what happens to you. Because the no's and not getting what we want are a part of the game. Right. But if you call it rejection, as so many people do, people will say, oh, rejection is just part of sales. No, it's not. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in the world. So that's the second component. The third component is pretty basic, and that is doing the work. Because we all know what to do, but if we're not disciplined, if we don't have the habits of a person who's going to do what it takes, then we're not going to accomplish anything.
Yeah.
So there's 4 pillars. And finally, the 4th pillar is the one that I've been teaching forever. And that is having a proven sales process with the what to say and the how to say it. And let's face it, you and I know that there's just a lot of garbage out there that has been taught for years and is continuing to be taught. I go crazy when I log into LinkedIn and I see some of the stuff that people are suggesting, and they're going, oh, I make cold calls all day long and I'm getting rejected all day long. And then they'll post a video of what they're saying and they'll call up and say, hey, this is a cold call. You don't know me. And now if you want, don't hate me, but do you want to roll the dice? Does my name ring a bell? So there's about 5 or 8 mistakes I just mentioned right there.
I'm sorry to call you.
Yeah. So anyway, there's a long answer to a short question.
I'm really interested in the 4 steps because they are proven, and it's from the way you said it, it sounds so obvious, but people are so stuck in their own bubble. Like resilience, when they say resilience, but it is how you deal with those setbacks and the questions that you ask yourself, which is so important, and go, what did I learn from that call? How can I improve for the next time? What do I need to do to make myself better? And it's the language that you tell yourself that can improve yourself. That's why nowadays, and technology really helps in here. The likes of, there's a piece of technology called Gong or AI note takers. And what that, you can actually review what you've said, and it tells you the positive, negative stuff that you've said. And then you can just review it. And that's what you should be doing. If you're doing back-to-backs and it hasn't gone so well and you are reviewing it, is to record it and go, well, what can I do to improve it? I know back in the day, I was always taught when I was in London, my first patch was in the city of London. And I was always told, from what I learned, is take a dictaphone with you and record a meeting. I was always told to stick the dictaphone on the table, and after the meeting is just review what you've said and review how you focus in on the other person. What sort of hacks did you have along the way similar to that?
It's so funny because way back in the day, when we had regular telephones, there was a company called Radio Shack in the US, and maybe they were worldwide, I'm not sure, but they sold these little suction cup devices with a wire that you would plug into a cassette tape recorder. And that was my first experience with recording phone calls. And over the years, that of course evolved just a little bit. And my company, I probably sold tens of thousands of, we called them recording links, that would plug into your phone and then eventually plug into your computer and record phone calls. So I've always been a big proponent of recording phone calls. And part of my coaching was I would get people to send recordings of their calls prior to doing training, because I wanted to hear what they were saying. And then I would use that as coaching. And even further, and these are things I've written in the late 80s and even 90s, I said, take your recordings and have them transcribed so that you can see what you're saying. So today, when people always say, well, what changed? How has technology changed? I say technology is one of the greatest things that has ever happened to us as salespeople in order to help us be more effective. But it's also one of the biggest detriments to salespeople, as it always is, because whenever the next new shiny object comes out, people will try to use that as a crutch and as a lazy way to avoid what is actually going to make us money, and that is speaking to people, which will never be replaced.
That's exactly where I was going to go, because I've noticed over the time I've noticed people hiding behind emails. They send out an email, and I was going to actually, I just had a spam email a little while ago. I was going to read it out to you, but my phone's over there. But people hide behind technology. And people hide behind that, and they expect to get a call to action from telling you how wonderful they are. But that's how they are. But there's nothing to do with me and how I am. What's the relevance in your world? Well, why don't you just pick up the phone first? And ironically enough, just before here, I just had a cold call, and it made me smile. The first one of the day, and it really made me smile. And he actually framed everything really well. Unfortunately, he couldn't match the pricing that I already had, but made me smile that he actually picked up the phone and he didn't hide behind technology. So proof is in the pudding. Some people do it But what's your feeling on this technology side? And we did allude to some of it, but how can we get over this call reluctance?
Well, again, as I said before, competence will give us a confidence. Call reluctance is, I mean, there can be a lot of different reasons for an individual having call reluctance. It could be maybe just their identity is not somebody where they see themselves as being someone who reaches out to someone else. So there's something that's kind of deep seated there. They can get as much information as they want, but they need to work on their identity and try to figure out, what story am I telling myself that's causing me to not want to pick out the phone and reach out to people? Is it because I have some self-limiting beliefs about my worth or my company's worth or my product's worth? Or is it something that happened to me way back in my childhood where I mean, there's all different things, different kinds of things that could be going on there. So that's why traditional sales training fails, because they'll say, here's a script, just call more people. You got to love the no's, where that's why people they're thinking, okay, well, I know I'm going to get the no's. I know I should love the no's, but gosh, that doesn't make sense to me.
Question, I want to jump in there because you mentioned script. And I want to deep dive into that because you might know what I'm going to say here, but I had to say about it. What are your thoughts on a script, and how should you use a script and when not to use it?
Well, one of my favorite sayings is, Jason, the absolute worst time to think about what you're going to say is as it's already leaving your mouth. And too many people do that. And some of the worst advice that any sales trainer could give someone is, hey, you don't need a script. Just go be yourself. Well, if yourself is not a person who knows what to say, you are going to go down in flames miserably. Okay. Now, with that being said, how should you use a script? Well, you should use a script like an actor uses a script, and more importantly, as an improv actor also uses a script, or an improv comedian, not like a telemarketer who is reading from a script. That's the big difference. And I always ask my audience, has anybody here seen a movie or watched something on Netflix recently? Everybody goes, oh yeah. And I'll say, here's a shocker. All those people were working from scripts. Did they sound like it? No. So anybody who has an aversion to working from a script, again, their reality is they're comparing it to the telemarketer who's reading to them. Kids like to be read to, adults don't. Now, with that being said, we can't prepare every single thing, or we can't script out every single thing we're going to say on a sales call, but we can prepare what we're going to say. So for example, the parts of the call that can be totally scripted, your opening. Because most people answer the phone with some variation of hello, right? So therefore, everything I say after hello in my first 15 or 20 seconds can and should be scripted. So I know it backward and forward, but it's going to be like the first time I ever said it to you, right? Then after that, I'm going to have questions. Now, I can prepare all my questions, but I can't prepare what they're going to say. But I can prepare for almost all of the things they're going to say, and I can have answers prepared for where I'm going to go. Now, all of that needs to be internalized, because you can't have that up on a screen in front of you and expect to be, oh, just a minute, let me go find the answer to that. Even though some people do. Right. So this is where being smooth comes from. And that is through experience, through repetition, and learning from every single one. And as I always talk about, if you can learn something from every single call, you should never, ever call that rejection. So ask yourself two questions at the end of a sales call. Number one, what did I like about it? Let's reward ourselves. What gets rewarded gets repeated, right? And then the other very important question, and notice the wording of this, is what will I do differently next time? And notice that's hugely different than what didn't I like? I know when you're coaching salespeople, I'm coaching salespeople, we'll ask them about the call. They'll immediately go, well, I didn't like the way I sounded it. No, wait, no. What will you do differently? Let's focus on the constructive part, because now we're learning.
It's there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. And I always like to say feed forward. So next time, what would you do differently? How would you frame that? How would you see that? And ask yourself some different questions to get out of that negative Nelly head and get into future pace with how can I apply that for next time? So the sales script, I get that, and you internalize it and you have it in your head. But what about the cold call in person where you don't have the script? What is different?
Well, the method of communication.
Yeah.
Because the opening still should be scripted in a sense. I mean, let's face it, what is a script? A script is a collection of words that have been well thought out and hopefully tested, that we have put together, that are designed to get the audience response that we're hoping for.
Yeah.
So when I walk into someone's office or walk into a meeting or sit down in a meeting, I know exactly what I'm going to say, but it's going to sound like the first time I ever said it. Think about this. Anything that you are really proficient on and could speak for, let's say, and everybody could do this. I don't care who you are, because everybody is passionate and an expert in something. It might be on how to garden or whatever. And you get somebody all lit up about what they're passionate about, you get them talking about it, right? They can do it off the top of their head. Guess what? That's scripted. Because why? Because they know it and they know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a shocker to some people. Well, then the goal becomes for salespeople to know what you're going to say in almost any situation so well that you don't need it in front of you, but the script is internalized.
The script is inside the mind, and that's knowledge, and that's also expertise from that. Something I'm curious, because I wrote about this during the week, but I want your take on it. Introverted, extroverted. What's the difference in sales?
Well, there's been so much written on this. And matter of fact, I think it was Matthew Pollard who wrote a book about extroverts and sales. And you might be shocked that I'm somewhat of an introvert. And I think it depends on what your definition is. Some people say that, the extrovert is the person who's going to be the life of the party and is going to go in and own the room and tell the jokes and be lively. I got to tell you, when I go into a social situation or a networking event, I really don't like those things, because many times it forces you to try to be what you're not. And I think the most and to me, those things are labels. And it goes back to what I've defined as one of the attributes of the ultimate sales professional, and that is being others focused. So when I'm others focused, and that kind of drives my thinking and it drives my action, I'm going to be interested in you, what's going on in your world. And it's going to cause me to ask questions. It's going to cause me to listen, not just to wait my turn, but to understand what you said and react to what you said, kind of like what you're doing here in this interview.
Oh, I was just thinking the same thing there. Yeah.
As opposed to just reading from a list of questions. Because as a podcast host myself, I know and have been on hundreds of shows, I can tell you've done your homework, and I can tell you're a great communicator because you react to what's being said as opposed to the list of 10 standard questions. Well, how did you get started? What's the one thing? And that's, so I know you asked the introvert versus extrovert question, but it's relevant here. And I think if somebody, and let's go back to the questions we ask ourselves and the stories we tell ourselves. If somebody says, I'm an introvert, I couldn't be good at sales, you need to ask yourself a better question and say, why do I say I'm an introvert? And your answers might be, well, because I'm not that blowhard person who just tries to overtake the room.
I think it's that perception, isn't it? But it really, from what I've learned, I find the introvert more detailed orientated. And in today's world, when I did some stuff at Google, the engineers are phenomenal at asking questions. Incredible. And I'm sitting there going, my God, I didn't even think of that. Where did you get that? Because they're so curiously minded on finding out about the other person and finding out what the problem actually is. They're really good at listening and asking really good, phenomenal questions. Just a little bit of training at the end or the beginning just to help them get to where they want to go, and hopefully they close themselves, or that's the ideal solution. I found their mindset and the way they get to the detail is phenomenal. So I've got a question for you. No, you answer that question. Go, far away.
Well, I may know where you're going. So I'm sorry. That's one of my rules. Don't interrupt. So go ahead, ask the question.
Well, the question that I always like to ask, maybe a little bit along this, if you were interviewing you, what sort of questions would you ask yourself?
What kind of information am I looking for if I'm interviewing me?
Yeah, well, what would you say to yourself at this point of the conversation if you were interviewing you right now?
Well, if I were you,
Yeah.
I would say, what are some specific things that you can do in order to be more successful in your sales and your prospecting? And do you want me to answer my question?
Well, absolutely. You answer your question. It's a bit of a cop out for me, really.
Well, number one, I would say get a process that you're comfortable with, that feels real, that is proven, that isn't salesy. There's a lot. Let's face it. There's more information, more free information that's available out there than has ever been in the history of the world. I would suggest that you be a little bit picky and choosy about who you're following and the information that you're collecting, because anybody can publish today, and many do, and that doesn't mean that it's good. So look for material that is actually being used by successful people. On a personal basis, I would say work on, and I think you just touched on this as it relates to the Google engineers, one characteristic that all very successful people have is curiosity. And when you work on your curiosity muscle, when you're always asking why, when you're curious about the other person, what are they interested in? Why do they buy? Why do they not buy? Why are they using what they use now? Why did they just say what they did? And if you think about curiosity and always asking why, you're going to take the focus off of yourself and put it more on them. And again, that is what I mentioned as being one of the characteristics of the ultimate sales professional, being others focused. This does not come naturally, especially for the extrovert, because what's the extrovert doing? They're normally talking about themselves and trying to be the life of the party, as opposed to that person in the corner. If you can get them all lit up and you ask them about themselves, they're going to start talking. But you know what also is interesting is that sometimes they get uncomfortable talking about themselves. And this, I would consider myself to be in this category. They get uncomfortable talking about themselves, and they're going to shift it back to you. They're going to start asking you questions because they're curious about you as well. So they have a higher EQ, right? They're realizing, oh, wait a minute, I've been talking about myself so long. How about the other person?
Yeah.
And I would say go into every sales situation, or really any interpersonal situation, whether it be a meeting, whether it be a discussion with your spouse or a family member. And before you do that, stop and say, what interests them? So I have an acronym that I like to use, that I teach, and it's WIT, W-I-T. What interests them? And I have it up on my wall here. And if you make that part of your everyday philosophy and habit pattern, you'll find yourself thinking more about, how can I be interested in this other person? How can I get them talking? And then I've got one other acronym that I suggest people remind themselves of if they're in a conversation and they find that they're talking a little bit too much about themselves. This one is called INAM, I-N-A-M, and that stands for, it's not about me.
Absolutely. I love that, because, and that's what I got from your book. That's what resonated with me. And I was going, well, that's exactly me, because I'm an extrovert introvert. I like to talk when I feel it's right, but a lot of social situations, I'll just sit and observe in the corner as opposed to being the center of attention. It depends on everything depends on context to the situation and where you are. If you're with a client, it's slightly different because you want to give the best that you can, but then you ask the questions and shut up or be quiet. I've always had that acronym in my head. Curious as well, because there's lots of different methodologies out there. But I always think it just, like, you got spin, which was in the 1970s, 80s, and then you got consultative selling, and then you have there's some absolutely crazy ones at the moment. What would you call your methodology? I think I know, but what would you call it?
Well, I mean, I call my prospecting methodology the smart calling methodology. And essentially what that means is let's be smart about our calls in the sense that we want to know something about the people and the organizations and the situations that we're calling into before we call, so that we can make our messaging relevant, so that we can make our questioning relevant, so that we can make our recommendations relevant and on target. Because let's face it, that's the only way we're going to create interest today in our noise-filled world. And that's the only reason why people have ever bought, because they feel like it's all about them and the solution is for them. So my entire methodology, again, smart calling, and what I've learned over the years, and I've read and studied every single sales process out there, and they all come up with some cute names. Most of the very popular ones are pretty good. They're all sound, but they're all pretty basic when you boil down to it. It's let's ask questions to find out what somebody's interested in so that we can provide them the right solution that's going to be a fit for what they're looking for. And I mean, it's pretty basic. I mean, the human brain hasn't changed in how many thousands of years, right? Even though there are a lot of people out there now that claim that they've invented something new. There's not a lot new.
I don't think there is, because that's where I was curious too, because I think nothing's changed between technology has evolved and how we get to the place. But I believe that the process is pretty similar. The Dale Carnegies of the world and everything else like that, even Think Rich, Grow Rich, where he interviewed thousands of people over 100 years ago. Nothing's really changed. It's human interaction and it's people skills. Once we've mastered that, I think we have the world at our feet.
So true. And I think the best book I ever read in college was not a textbook. It was How to Win Friends and Influence
People. Yeah, absolutely. I've read that many, many times.
And the principles still apply today. And you know what, Jason? They apply more today, and they're, I think, more important than they ever have been, because in our society with all this technology and AI, and supposedly we're more connected than we've ever been, we're actually less connected than we've ever been. Because if you go anywhere outside your door where there's more than 3 or 4 people, I guarantee that half of them will eventually be looking at their phone and not talking to the person in front of them. It's like, hello, I'm here, right? And when people can actually have this kind of interaction, and I love video because what it's done is that it's helped what I've been teaching for years, and that is not being there physically in sales. So video has really bridged that visual gap. And I mean, let's face it, even though face-to-face is the most effective way to communicate, it's also the most expensive. So that, and by the way, most people as buyers would probably rather not have you in their office if they're going to engage in business, because it's going to take so much more of their time. Because in a face-to-face meeting, about 80% of the time, actually their face-to-face is not on business, only about 20%. Whereas when we're on the phone, we flip that to about 80% is spent on talking business as opposed to 20% on all the peripheral stuff.
Yeah, the Pareto principle always works, and the 80-20 rule, which is perfect for that. And I since COVID, and I think things have changed a little bit because we can actually rather than picking up the phone, we're actually interacting by the online video, and I can see the nonverbal cues, and I can see a lot as well. So that has sort of changed it in a bit, but it's technology as well. The last golden nugget that you can give so we can feed it forward to the people and listeners, what would that golden nugget be?
And I always get this question, and I'm going to go back and I guess further reemphasize what I had just said. If I could give one piece of advice to anybody in sales, and it's this: get information before you give information.
Love it. Love it. That's all we need. That's all we need from you. Now's the time to sell yourself. And along the bottom here, for the audio listeners, they can't actually see this, but it goes with Art's books. So rather than me talking about it, how can people find out about you? How can they get your books? And there's also a cheeky downloads where you can get a free book online, but you have to pay the shipping. So I believe from your website, and I've looked it up.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the clearinghouse for everything that I have is my main site, which is called smartcalling.com, So there you can get access to my podcast, which is theartofsales.com. We've got over 300 episodes there. And it's mostly, most of my podcasts are sales training episodes. I don't have a lot of guests. Also there, I have several free downloads. We've got a little cheat sheet on my smart calling process, which is a fill in the blanks template where you can come up with your own interest creating opening statement or voicemail within minutes by filling in the blanks. And I also have a free training video along with that. I also have a free objections masterclass. And spoiler alert here, you don't try to overcome objections because most objections training tells people they're wrong, and you're never going to be successful by telling somebody they're wrong. So
I object to that, Art.
why is that?
Exactly. That's phenomenal. Where else can we find you online?
Well, again, everything I have is at smartcalling.com. The new coaching program that I just teased, you can get access to that there. Also, of course, I'm on LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do so. But please also mention that I was on Jason's podcast here, because I'm a big believer in, if you're going to connect with somebody, tell them why, and take at least a second to do a little bit of research and be relevant. So I'm a big believer in that.
Create ripple effect forward.
And the book, Smart Calling, you can get that at Amazon. But if you go through my site at smartcalling.com, I also have a free companion course that you can get. I don't sell the book myself, so you'll buy it through Amazon, but go through my site and there's a link to get the free companion course.
Perfect. Thank you so much for today. You've given us loads and loads of value, which I knew I would get it from you, because after listening to your book and reading it, and I would advise, I don't care how experienced you think you might be, the art of reading from the experts and people that mastered the process over the years, I think it's essential. If you just pick up one thing that can help you and excel yourself forward, it's worth reading. I would absolutely suggest it. Everything I read all the time, like yourself, but if you can just take that point away, definitely do it. So thank you very much for today, Art. You've been listening to the Global Sales Leader podcast. My name is Jason Cooper. I speak with phenomenal people, and I'm very picky and choosy about who I speak to, because I want to make sure that, number one, I'm excited about who I'm speaking to, because I want to make sure that the audience takes something away and learn and impact their world. There we go, back through that empathetic communication there, Art. It's not about us. It's about, we're the vessel for people to learn and grow and get better at what they do. So again, really appreciate that. And by the way, everything on the show notes will be on Apple iTunes and all of your normal podcast downloads. And we're also on YouTube as well. And you can also find on jasoncooper.io. That is IO at the end of that. Don't get confused with the .coms. It's the IO. So appreciate that. Have a wonderful day.